The morning sun cast long shadows through the ornate windows of Valdoria Palace, its golden rays illuminating the dust particles that danced in the air of Queen Isabella's private study. She sat at her mahogany desk, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the envelope that had arrived moments earlier through discreet channels. The weight of it felt heavier than any crown she had ever worn. Isabella had ruled the kingdom of Valdoria alongside her husband, King Alexander, for 15 years. Their marriage had been the stuff of fairy tales, a love match that had captured the hearts of their subjects and strengthened the monarchy's position in an increasingly modern world. Together, they had weathered political storms, economic challenges, and the constant scrutiny that came with their positions. But nothing had prepared Isabella for what she was about to discover. The envelope bore no official seal, no return address. It had been delivered by a member of her personal guard, Marcus, whose loyalty to the queen was unquestionable. His grave expression when he handed it to her had sent a chill down her spine. "Your Majesty," he had said quietly, "this came through our secure channels. The sender insisted it was for your eyes only." Isabella's heart raced as she carefully opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. As she spread them across her desk, her world began to crumble. The images showed Alexander in various locations around the capital city, always in the company of the same woman, a young diplomat named Sophia Castellan, who had recently joined the foreign ministry. In some photos, they were simply talking, but their body language spoke volumes. In others, they were entering a discreet apartment building in the old quarter of the city or sharing intimate dinners in restaurants far from the palace district. The most damning images were the most recent ones, dated just 3 days ago. Alexander and Sophia on a private yacht, her hand on his chest, his arms around her waist. The intimacy captured in these moments was undeniable. Isabella felt as though the floor beneath her feet had disappeared. Every public appearance they had made together in recent months suddenly took on a different meaning. Every late meeting, every diplomatic trip, every excuse for his absence, all of it now cast in the harsh light of betrayal. She thought of their 3 children: Crown Prince Theodore, age 16, Princess Catherine, 14, and young Prince James, only 10 years old. How would this affect them? The monarchy they were born to inherit? The stability of the kingdom itself? Isabella's mind raced with the implications. Valdoria had enjoyed unprecedented peace and prosperity under their joint rule. The people adored their royal family, seeing them as a symbol of tradition balanced with progressive values. This scandal could shatter everything they had built. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Enter," she called, quickly gathering the photographs and sliding them back into the envelope. Her private secretary, Lady Margaret Worthington, entered with her usual brisk efficiency. Margaret had served Isabella since she was a young princess, and there were few secrets between them. The older woman took one look at Isabella's pale face and immediately closed the door behind her. "Your Majesty," Margaret began, her voice filled with concern, "what has happened?" Isabella struggled to maintain her composure. The training of a lifetime: always appear strong, never show weakness in public, warred with her desire to collapse into her old friend's arms. "Margaret," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to cancel my appointments for this morning." "All of them?" "Of course, ma'am. Shall I give reason?" "A sudden illness," Isabella replied, the irony not lost on her. She did feel ill, sick to her very soul. "And Margaret, I need you to discreet inquiries about the king's schedule for the past 6 months. Every meeting, every trip, every engagement. I want to know where he was and who he was with." Margaret's eyes widened slightly, but she was too well trained to ask questions. "It shall be done, Your Majesty. Is there anything else?" Isabella hesitated, then made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events that would rock the kingdom. "Send for my cousin, Duke Edmund. Tell him it's a matter of utmost urgency and discretion. And, Margaret, not a word of this to anyone, not even to your assistant." After Margaret left, Isabella stood and walked to the window, looking out at the capital city spread below. Valdoria was waking up to another ordinary day. Citizens were going about their business, unaware that their queen's world had just shattered. The morning news would soon broadcast cheerful stories about the royal family's upcoming anniversary celebration. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of what everyone believed was a perfect union. She thought back to their wedding day, how young and hopeful they had been. Alexander had been so handsome in his military uniform, his eyes shining with love as he spoke his vows. They had promised to stand by each other through whatever challenges came their way. Had it all been a lie? Or had things changed? Or had she simply been blind to the signs? Isabella's reflection in the window showed a woman still beautiful at 42, but now she saw the fine lines around her eyes, the slight softening of her jawline. Was that it? Had Alexander simply grown bored with her? Sophia Castellan was 28, with the kind of effortless beauty that turned heads. She was brilliant too, fluent in 6 languages, with degrees from the finest universities in Europe. Isabella had actually approved her appointment to the Foreign Ministry, impressed by her credentials. The bitter irony was not lost on her. She had unknowingly welcomed her husband's mistress into their inner circle. How many state dinners had Sophia attended? How many times had Isabella smiled at her, made polite conversation, while the younger woman was secretly involved with her husband? Duke Edmund arrived within the hour. Isabella's cousin was one of the few people she trusted completely. As the head of the Royal Intelligence Service, he had access to resources and information networks that even the Queen could not directly command. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 50s, with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. "Isabella," he said gently, once they were alone in her study, "what has happened?" She wordlessly handed him the envelope. Edmund's expression grew increasingly grim as he examined each photograph. When he finished, he set them aside and looked at his cousin with deep sympathy. "How long have you known about these?" he asked. "They arrived this morning," Isabella replied. "Edmund, I need to know everything. How long this has been going on, how many people know who sent these photos and why. And, most importantly, I need to know what our options are." Edmund nodded slowly. "I'll put my best people on it immediately. Discreet, of course. But, Isabella, you need to prepare yourself. If someone has gone to the trouble of documenting this so thoroughly, they likely have an agenda. This could be blackmail, or someone preparing to go public with a scandal." "I know," Isabella said quietly. "That's why we need to act quickly. If this gets out, the kingdom would survive," Edmund said firmly. "Valdoria has weathered worse storms. But the damage to the monarchy, to your children, to the public trust, it would be significant." They spent the next hour developing a preliminary strategy. Edmund would investigate the source of the photographs and the full extent of Alexander's relationship with Sophia. Isabella would maintain normal appearances while they gathered information. It was crucial that Alexander not know she was aware of his affair, at least not yet. As Edmund prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Isabella, I'm sorry this is happening to you. You deserve better." After he left, Isabella sat alone in her study, the weight of her crown feeling heavier than ever. She had always known that being queen meant personal sacrifices, but she had never imagined this kind of betrayal. The photographs seemed to mock her from their envelope. Evidence of a life she had thought was built on solid ground, now revealed to be constructed on shifting sand. A memory surfaced unbidden. Alexander at their anniversary party last year, raising a toast to their partnership. "To my beloved Isabella," he had said, his voice warm with apparent affection, "who makes every challenge bearable and every joy complete." The crowd had applauded, and she had smiled, believing every word. Now she wondered if Sophia had been in that crowd, watching them play their roles while knowing the truth. The door opened again, and this time it was Alexander himself who entered. Isabella's heart clenched at the sight of him. Even now, even knowing what she knew, he was still devastatingly handsome. His dark hair was slightly rumpled from his morning ride, and his blue eyes sparkled with their usual warmth. "Good morning, my dear," he said, crossing to kiss her cheek. She forced herself not to flinch at his touch. "Margaret said you were feeling unwell. Should I send for the physician?" "No," Isabella managed, her voice surprisingly steady. "Just a headache. It will pass." Alexander studied her face with what appeared to be genuine concern. "You work too hard," he said. "Perhaps you should rest this morning. I can handle the council meeting." The same council meeting where Sophia Castellan would be presenting her report on the new trade negotiations. Isabella felt a surge of rage that she quickly suppressed. "That's kind of you," she said carefully. "But I'll be fine by then." "If you're certain," Alexander said. He squeezed her shoulder gently, a gesture that once would have comforted her but now felt like a mockery. "I have some correspondence to attend to, but shall we lunch together? Just the two of us." "Of course," Isabella replied, even as she wondered if he had ever actually lunched alone with her in recent months, or if there had always been someone else. After he left, Isabella returned to the window. The sun was higher now, and the city was fully awake. Somewhere out there, Sophia Castellan was probably preparing for her day, perhaps thinking of her secret royal lover. Did she feel guilty? Triumphant? Did she imagine herself as the next queen? Isabella straightened her shoulders. She was not some naive girl who would crumble at the first sign of adversity. She was Queen Isabella of Valdoria, and she would handle this crisis with the same strength and intelligence she had brought to every other challenge in her reign. But first, she needed information. Knowledge was power, and right now, she was operating in the dark. She moved to her desk and began making discreet calls to her most trusted allies. If war was coming to the palace, and she had no doubt that it was, she would not face it alone. The game had begun, and Isabella intended to win, no matter the cost. The palace might be in shock now, but soon it would be Alexander who was scrambling to respond. As she worked, one question haunted her above all others. Who had sent the photographs? And what did they want? Because one thing was certain, this was not just about exposing an affair. Someone had a larger plan in motion, and Isabella and her family were caught in the center of it. The scandal was just the beginning. Part 2, the Grand Council Chamber of Valdoria Palace had witnessed centuries of political intrigue, diplomatic negotiations, and royal decrees. Its vaulted ceilings and tapestried walls had absorbed whispered conspiracies and bold declarations alike. But on this particular morning, as Queen Isabella entered the chamber for the scheduled trade meeting, the very air seemed charged with intention that only she fully understood. Isabella had spent the remainder of the morning after Alexander's visit preparing herself mentally for this performance. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a deep sapphire suit that projected authority while complementing her complexion. Her hair was styled in an elegant chignon, and her makeup was flawless. If she was to face her husband's mistress across a conference table, she would do so looking every inch the queen she was. The council members were already assembled when she arrived. Foreign Minister Lord Harrington stood as she entered, followed by the other ministers and advisors. And there, near the end of the table, stood Sophia Castellan. Isabella forced herself to look at the younger woman with the same polite professional interest she would show any member of staff. Sophia was indeed beautiful, Isabella noted with clinical detachment. She wore a tailored gray dress that was appropriate yet flattering, her dark hair pulled back in a simple style that emphasized her delicate features. When their eyes met, Sophia smiled and inclined her head respectfully. There was nothing in her expression to suggest guilt or defiance, just the proper deference of a junior diplomat to her sovereign. "Your Majesty," Lord Harrington began once everyone was seated, "Miss Castellan has prepared a comprehensive report on the proposed trade agreements with our eastern neighbors. I believe you'll find her analysis most illuminating." "I'm sure I will," Isabella replied smoothly. "Please proceed, Miss Castellan." As Sophia began her presentation, Isabella found herself studying the woman who had captured her husband's attention. She was articulate and clearly intelligent, presenting complex economic data with ease. Her hands moved gracefully as she spoke, and Isabella noticed she wore no rings. Of course not. That would be too obvious. Alexander entered the chamber halfway through the presentation, apologizing for his lateness. Isabella watched carefully as he took his seat, but his expression betrayed nothing unusual when he looked at Sophia. He was either an excellent actor or had grown comfortable with deception. Perhaps both. Excellent analysis, Miss Castellan, Alexander said when Sophia concluded. Your recommendations regarding the agricultural provisions are particularly astute. Isabella noticed the slight flush that colored Sophia's cheeks at the king's praise. To anyone else, it would appear to be the natural response of a young diplomat receiving royal approval. But Isabella now saw it differently. The pleasure of a woman hearing compliments from her lover, even in this formal setting. I agree, Isabella said, her voice cutting through the murmur of agreement from the other council members. Though I do have some concerns about the proposed timeline. Miss Castellan, have you considered the impact of the harvest season on these negotiations? It was a valid question, but also a test. Isabella wanted to see how Sophia would handle direct scrutiny from her. The younger woman didn't falter, launching into a detailed explanation of seasonal considerations. She was good, Isabella had to admit. Very good. The meeting continued for another hour, with various ministers contributing their thoughts. Throughout it all, Isabella maintained perfect composure, even as her mind catalogued every glance, every interaction between Alexander and Sophia. Were they truly so discreet, or had she simply been blind before? As the meeting concluded, Isabella made a calculated decision. Miss Castellan, she called out as the room began to empty. A word, please. She saw Alexander pause near the door, his body tensing slightly. Interesting. I'll see you at lunch, my dear, he said to Isabella, his tone perhaps a shade too casual. Of course, Isabella replied, not looking at him. When they were alone, except for two guards at the door, Isabella gestured for Sophia to sit back down. The younger woman did so, her expression politely curious but giving nothing away. Your work is impressive, Isabella began, choosing her words carefully. Lord Harrington speaks highly of your contributions to the Foreign Ministry. Thank you, Your Majesty. It's an honor to serve the kingdom. Isabella studied her for a long moment. Tell me about yourself, Miss Castellan. I realize we've never had the opportunity to speak privately. A flicker of something, uncertainty, fear, crossed Sophia's face before she composed herself. There's not much to tell, Your Majesty. I studied international relations at Cambridge, then worked briefly for the embassy in Paris before returning to Valdoria. No family? No, attachments. Isabella kept her tone conversational, but she saw Sophia's hands tighten slightly in her lap. My parents passed away several years ago, Your Majesty. As for attachments, Sophia paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. My work keeps me quite busy. I find it fulfilling. I'm sure you do, Isabella murmured. Ambition is admirable in a young woman. Tell me, what are your long-term goals? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? 10. Sophia shifted slightly in her seat. I hope to continue serving Valdoria in whatever capacity I'm needed, Your Majesty. Perhaps as an ambassador one day, if I prove worthy of such a position. An ambassador, Isabella repeated. Yes, I could see that. Though such positions often require sacrifices. The life of a diplomat can be quite lonely, always moving from country to country. It's difficult to maintain personal relationships. I understand that, Your Majesty, Sophia said quietly. Some things are worth sacrificing for. There was a hint of something deeper in her words. Isabella leaned back in her chair, maintaining her pleasant expression even as her heart raced. Indeed. Well, Miss Castellan, I won't keep you any longer. Thank you for your excellent work on these trade negotiations. Sophia rose and curtsied. Thank you, Your Majesty. She hesitated at the door, then turned back. Your Majesty, if I may, you've always been an inspiration to me. Your dedication to Valdoria, the way you balance your duties with grace. I have nothing but the deepest respect for you. After she left, Isabella sat alone in the chamber, processing the conversation. Had that final comment been genuine admiration or calculated manipulation? Or perhaps guilt manifesting as excessive deference? She couldn't tell, and that frustrated her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Duke Edmund. Initial findings ready. Can you meet this afternoon? Isabella typed back quickly. After lunch with A. My study, 3 p.m. The lunch with Alexander was an exercise in torture. They dined on the private terrace overlooking the rose garden, the same place where they had shared countless meals over the years. Alexander seemed relaxed, discussing upcoming state visits and their children's schedules as if nothing was amiss. Theodore's fencing master says he's showing real promise, Alexander said, cutting into his salmon. He might compete nationally next year. That's wonderful, Isabella replied, though the food tasted like ash in her mouth. He's worked hard for it. Like his mother, Alexander said with a smile that once would have warmed her heart. Always determined to excel. Isabella watched him over her wine glass. How many times had he sat across from her like this, while harboring his secret? How many family dinners, state banquets, private moments have been tainted by his deception? I've been thinking, Alexander continued, perhaps we should take a family vacation after the anniversary celebrations. Somewhere private, just the 5 of us. The children would love it. The irony of him suggesting family time while maintaining an affair was not lost on Isabella. That sounds lovely, she managed. Where were you thinking? Maybe the estate in the mountains? Or we could sail to the private island. Complete privacy, no obligations. He reached across the table to take her hand. Just us. Isabella forced herself not to pull away from his touch. I'll check our schedules, she said noncommittally. After lunch, she practically fled to her study, where Duke Edmund was already waiting. He had spread several files across her desk, his expression grim. What have you found? Isabella asked without preamble. Edmund opened the first file. The affair has been going on for approximately 8 months. It began shortly after Miss Castellan joined the foreign ministry. At first, it appears to have been discreet meetings at diplomatic functions, but it escalated quickly. He showed her documentation, security footage from various locations, credit card records, witness statements from discreet inquiries. The picture they painted was damning. They've been meeting in an apartment in the old quarter, Edmund continued. It's registered under a shell company, but we traced it back to a private account Alexander maintains. He's been paying for it for 6 months. Isabella felt sick. The level of deception required to maintain such an arrangement was staggering. Who else knows? That's where it gets complicated, Edmund said, opening another file. At least 3 members of the king's security detail must be aware. They've been facilitating his movements. 2 palace staff members have likely guessed, based on scheduling irregularities. And then there's the source of your photographs. Yes, Isabella said tightly. Who sent them? Edmund's expression grew even more serious. We've traced the photos to a private investigator named Marcus Webb. He's known for handling delicate matters for wealthy clients. But here's the interesting part. He was hired through intermediaries. We're still working to identify the actual client. Blackmail? Isabella asked. Possibly, but no demands have been made yet. It could be someone gathering leverage for future use. Or, Edmund hesitated. Or, Isabella prompted. Or someone who wanted you to know the truth, but couldn't tell you directly. Someone with access to palace intelligence who knew about the affair, but couldn't act officially. Isabella considered this. Someone in the government? The security services? That's our working theory. There are those who might see Alexander's affair as a security risk, especially given Miss Castellan's position in the foreign ministry. She has access to sensitive information. This added a new dimension to the crisis. It wasn't just a personal betrayal anymore. It was potentially a matter of national security. There's more, Edmund said quietly. We've discovered that Miss Castellan has been in contact with foreign agents. Nothing treasonous that we can prove, but she's been asking questions about trade negotiations that go beyond her official purview. Isabella stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Are you suggesting she's using Alexander to access state secrets? I'm saying it's a possibility we can't ignore, Edmund replied. She may genuinely care for him, or she may be playing a longer game. Either way, the security implications are serious. Isabella's mind raced. If Sophia was a foreign agent, then this scandal could bring down not just her marriage, but the entire government. But if she wasn't, if this was simply an affair of the heart, then any false accusations could backfire spectacularly. What are my options? She asked. Edmund had clearly prepared for this question. Option 1. Confront Alexander privately. Try to end the affair quietly and contain the damage. The risk is that he might not comply, or that whoever sent the photos might go public anyway. Option 2. Isabella asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. We build a comprehensive case. Document everything. Prepare for multiple scenarios including divorce, abdication, or a managed separation. We also investigate Miss Castellan thoroughly. If she is a security threat, we need proof. And option 3? Edmund looked uncomfortable. We could arrange for Miss Castellan to be transferred. A prestigious posting abroad, far from Valdoria. Make it an offer she can't refuse. Isabella turned back to face him. You mean exile her? In essence, yes. It's been done before in similar situations. Isabella considered all 3 options, none of them appealing. Each path led to pain and upheaval, just in different ways. I need more time, she said finally, and more information. I want to know everything about Sophia Castellan, her history, her connections, her motivations. And I want to know who's been watching them and why. Edmund nodded. I'll have a full report within 48 hours. In the meantime, you need to decide how long you can maintain this pretense with Alexander. After Edmund left, Isabella sat alone in her study as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. She thought about her children, about the kingdom, about the vow she had taken both as a wife and as a queen. Somehow, she had to find a path through this crisis that protected everyone she cared about. Everyone except perhaps herself. Her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. Darling, I need to attend an urgent security briefing this evening. I may be late for dinner with the children. Isabella stared at the message, wondering if it was even true or just another lie to cover a rendezvous with Sophia. She typed back, of course. I'll make your excuses to the children. She then made a decision that surprised even herself. She called her personal guard. I want a discreet security detail on the king this evening. Report his movements directly to me. If Alexander wanted to play games, she would learn the rules. The palace might be in shock, but Queen Isabella was beginning to form her response. The chess match had begun in earnest. That evening, as she dined with her children and made excuses for their father's absence, Isabella watched their innocent faces and felt her resolve harden. Theodore spoke excitedly about his fencing tournament. Catherine shared gossip from her studies, and young James showed her his latest drawing. They trusted their parents completely, believed in the fairy tale of their family. Later, as she tucked James into bed, he asked sleepily, Mama, why does Papa work so much lately? Isabella smoothed his hair gently. Being king is a big responsibility, darling. Sometimes it means making sacrifices. When I'm king, I won't work so much, James declared. I'll spend time with my family every day. Isabella kissed his forehead, fighting back tears. I'm sure you will, my love. You'll be a wonderful king someday. As she returned to her rooms, her guard discreet informed her that Alexander had indeed attended a security briefing for exactly 20 minutes. He had then left the palace in an unmarked car, destination unknown. Isabella thanked the guard and dismissed him. In her private sitting room, she poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the window, looking out at the lights of the city. Somewhere out there, her husband was with another woman, building a secret life that excluded her and threatened everything they had created together. But Isabella was not a woman to be underestimated. She had been trained from birth to be a queen, to put duty above personal desire, to think strategically in all situations. If Alexander thought she would simply accept this betrayal, he was about to learn otherwise. Tomorrow, she would begin her counteroffensive. She would gather allies, build her case, and prepare for every eventuality. The palace might be in shock now, but soon it would be Alexander who was scrambling to respond to her moves. As she prepared for bed, one last thought occurred to her. She retrieved the photographs from their hiding place and studied them again. Something about them nagged at her, some detail she was missing. Then she saw it. In one of the photos, partially visible in the background, was a figure she recognized. Someone who shouldn't have been there, someone whose presence raised new questions about the nature of this scandal. Isabella locked the photos away and made a mental note to discuss this with Edmund. The game was more complex than she had initially thought, with more players than just her husband and his mistress. But complexity didn't frighten her. She was Queen Isabella of Valdoria, and she would protect her throne, her children, and her kingdom, no matter the cost. Part 3, the pre-dawn hours, found Queen Isabella in an unexpected location. The palace's ancient library archives, a place few people visited anymore in the digital age. Dust motes danced in the beam of her flashlight as she made her way through the narrow aisles between towering shelves of leather-bound volumes. She was looking for something specific, something she remembered from her early days as queen when she had studied the history of Valdorian succession laws. 3 days had passed since Duke Edmund's initial report, and the situation had grown increasingly complex. The figure she had spotted in the background of one photograph had led to a disturbing revelation. Lord Nathaniel Blackwood, the Deputy Prime Minister, had been present at one of Alexander and Sophia's discreet meetings. This raised troubling questions about who knew of the affair and what political machinations might be at play. Isabella found what she was looking for, a thick volume bound in red leather titled Precedents and Protocols of Royal Succession. As she pulled it from the shelf, years of dust billowed around her. She had come here in secret before the palace fully awoke because she needed to understand all her options, even the most extreme ones. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, and Isabella quickly extinguished her flashlight. The library door creaked open, and a familiar voice called out softly, "Isabella, I know you're here." Her sister-in-law, Princess Margaret, stepped into the dim library. Margaret was Alexander's younger sister, a formidable woman in her own right who had never married, dedicating herself instead to charitable works and, some whispered, to keeping the monarchy's secrets. "How did you know?" Isabella asked, emerging from behind the shelves. Margaret smiled sadly. "I've known you for 20 years, my dear. When you're troubled, you always seek answers in books. Besides, the night guard mentioned seeing lights in the library." Isabella clutched the succession book to her chest. "I suppose there's no point in pretending with you." "No," Margaret agreed. "I've known about Alexander's indiscretion for several weeks now. I had hoped he would come to his senses." The two women found seats at one of the reading tables, the weight of their conversation hanging heavy between them. "How many others know?" Isabella asked. "Too many," Margaret replied. "It's becoming harder to contain. The staff whisper, the security detail grows uncomfortable with the deception, and now—" She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "Now there are political implications." "Lord Blackwood," Isabella said. It wasn't a question. Margaret nodded grimly. "He's been maneuvering for months, quietly building support among the conservative faction of Parliament. They believe the monarchy has become too progressive under your influence. An affair scandal would give them exactly the ammunition they need to push for changes." "What kind of changes?" Isabella asked, though she suspected she knew. "Limiting the monarch's executive powers. Establishing a regency council to oversee royal decisions. Some even whisper about pressuring Alexander to abdicate in favor of Theodore, with a parliamentary-appointed regent until he comes of age." Isabella felt a chill run through her. Her son was only 16. Placing him on the throne now with a regent would make him a puppet of whatever political faction controlled Parliament. "They would destroy everything we've built." "Yes," Margaret agreed, "which is why I believe Lord Blackwood might be behind the photographs. Create the crisis, then position himself as the solution." Isabella opened the succession book, running her fingers along the aged pages. "I've been researching precedents. There have been 3 cases in Valdorian history where a queen retained the throne after divorce from the king." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You're considering divorce?" "I'm considering all options," Isabella replied carefully. "But the law is complex. In 2 of those cases, the queen was the hereditary ruler, and the king was a consort. The 3rd case—" She turned to a marked page. "Queen Elisabetta in 1687. She successfully argued that her husband's adultery constituted treason against the crown, as it endangered the legitimate succession. That was a different time, Margaret said gently. The church had more power then, and adultery was actually a criminal offense. But the precedent exists, Isabella insisted. If I could prove that Alexander's affair compromises national security, that Sophia Castellan is a foreign agent. Do you have such proof? Margaret asked. Isabella closed the book with a sigh. Not yet. Edmund is investigating, but Sophia has been careful. Her contacts with foreign agents all have plausible explanations related to her work. They sat in silence for a moment before Margaret spoke again. There's another option, one that doesn't appear in any law book. Isabella looked at her sister-in-law curiously. Fight fire with fire, Margaret said. Alexander is not the only one who can have friendships. A discreet liaison of your own would level the playing field, so to speak. Make any threat of scandal mutual assured destruction. Isabella was shocked. You're suggesting I take a lover? I'm suggesting you consider all weapons in your arsenal, Margaret replied pragmatically. There are several suitable candidates. Ambassador Reginald has always admired you, and his discretion is legendary. Or perhaps Count Dmitri. He's handsome, charming, and, most importantly, owes your family considerable loyalty. I won't stoop to Alexander's level, Isabella said firmly. My children, your children need a mother who can protect their inheritance, Margaret interrupted. Sometimes, my dear, maintaining power requires distasteful choices. Before Isabella could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Duke Edmund. Emergency. Sophia Castellan has disappeared. Meet immediately. Isabella stood abruptly. I have to go. Margaret, please, tell no one of this conversation. Of course, Margaret said. But Isabella, whatever you decide, you must act soon. The wolves are circling, and they smell blood. An hour later, Isabella sat in Duke Edmund's secure office at the Intelligence Service headquarters. The room was windowless, swept daily for listening devices, and completely isolated from electronic interference. Edmund looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. Sophia Castellan failed to report for work yesterday. He began without preamble. Her apartment is empty, her belongings gone. But she left something behind, apparently deliberately. He handed Isabella a single sheet of paper. It was a handwritten note addressed to her. Your Majesty, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I know you have discovered the truth about Alexander and myself, and I cannot bear to cause you further pain. What began as an assignment became real, and that reality has become unbearable. I was recruited 2 years ago by forces that wished to compromise the Valdorian crown. They believed I could seduce the king and gain access to state secrets. They were half right. I did seduce him, or perhaps he seduced me. But I never betrayed Valdoria's secrets, no matter what they threatened. Alexander doesn't know the truth about me. He believes our love is pure, untainted by politics. Perhaps it would be kinder to let him keep that illusion. The enclosed USB drive contains all my correspondence with my handlers, proof of their plot against your throne. Use it wisely. I am disappearing because it is the only way to protect all involved. Please believe me when I say I never meant for it to go this far. In another life, I might have been proud to serve a queen as strong as you. Sophia Castellan. Isabella read the note 3 times, each word sinking in with horrible clarity. She was a spy. The USB drive confirms it, Edmund said, sliding a tablet across the desk. She was recruited by a consortium of business interests who profit from political instability. They wanted to create a scandal that would weaken the monarchy and allow them to push through favorable legislation. Isabella scrolled through the evidence. Emails, recorded conversations, payment receipts. It was damning, but also strangely vindicating. The affair was real, but it had been orchestrated from the beginning. Where is she now? Isabella asked. Our best guess is somewhere in South America. She was thorough in her disappearance. Professional help? Certainly. The question is, what do we do with this information? Isabella set down the tablet, her mind racing through possibilities. If we reveal this, Alexander becomes a victim rather than just an adulterer. Public sympathy might actually swing in his favor. But it would also reveal him as a fool, Edmund pointed out. A king who was so easily manipulated by a foreign agent. The damage to his credibility would be severe. What about Lord Blackwood's involvement? Edmund smiled grimly. That's where it gets interesting. The USB drive contains evidence that Blackwood was aware of Sophia's true identity. He was using her operation for his own purposes, planning to expose everything at the moment of maximum political advantage. Which means we have leverage over him, Isabella said slowly. Exactly. The question is how to use it. Isabella stood and paced the small office. The game had changed completely. What had seemed like a straightforward case of adultery was now revealed as an intricate web of espionage, political manipulation, and personal betrayal. I need to confront Alexander, she said finally. He needs to know the truth about Sophia. But first, I want Lord Blackwood neutralized. Can you arrange a private meeting? Edmund nodded. When? Tonight. Make it clear that his attendance is not optional. That afternoon, Isabella found herself in an unexpected situation, comforting her husband. Alexander had discovered Sophia's disappearance on his own and had come to Isabella's study, clearly distraught, but trying to maintain his composure. There's something I need to tell you, he began, not meeting her eyes. I've been foolish, Isabella. There was someone I know, Isabella said quietly. Alexander's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. You know, I've known for several days. I was waiting for you to tell me yourself. The color drained from Alexander's face. He sank into a chair, suddenly, looking far older than his 45 years. How long have you known? Does it matter? Isabella asked. The question is, what happens now? She's gone, Alexander said, his voice breaking. Just vanished. No explanation, no goodbye. I thought what we had was real. Isabella felt an unexpected surge of pity for him. Whatever his faults, his pain was genuine. It was real, she said carefully, just not in the way you thought. She made a decision then, one that would shape everything that followed. She handed him Sophia's note and watched as he read it, his expression cycling through disbelief, horror, and, finally, a crushing despair. I've been such a fool, he whispered. Yes, Isabella agreed. You have, but you've also been a victim. The question is, what are you prepared to do about it? Alexander looked up at her, tears in his eyes. For a moment, she saw the young prince she had fallen in love with all those years ago, vulnerable, uncertain, but ultimately good-hearted. Whatever you need, he said. Whatever it takes to make this right. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I'm not offering forgiveness, Isabella interrupted. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. What I'm offering is a partnership to save our throne and protect our children. Can you do that? Alexander nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? First, you will end all contact with anyone involved in covering up your affair. Second, you will support me completely in dealing with Lord Blackwood and his faction. Third, we will present a united front in public while we work through our personal issues in private. Can you agree to these terms? Yes, Alexander said without hesitation. Isabella, I don't, she said sharply. I'm not ready to hear apologies or explanations. Right now, I need a king who can help me protect this kingdom. Can you be that king? Alexander straightened in his chair, some of his royal bearing returning. I can. That evening, Lord Blackwood arrived for his meeting with Isabella, clearly expecting to negotiate from a position of strength. He was a tall, silver-haired man with cold gray eyes and an aristocratic bearing that bordered on arrogance. Your Majesty, he said with a perfunctory bow, I understand you wish to discuss matters of state. Isabella didn't invite him to sit. Instead, she activated a screen on the wall showing excerpts from Sophia's evidence, emails between Blackwood and the foreign agents, proof of his knowledge of the honeypot operation. I believe you're familiar with these documents, she said coolly. Blackwood's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. Isabella cut him off. I am stating facts. You knew Sophia Castellan was a foreign agent. You allowed her to seduce the king as part of your own political machinations. In some countries, that would be considered treason. You can't prove I can and I will unless you do exactly as I say. Isabella stepped closer to him, every inch the queen despite her smaller stature. You will resign from your position as Deputy Prime Minister, citing health concerns. You will retire from public life completely. You will never speak of this matter to anyone. In exchange, I won't have you arrested and tried for conspiracy against the crown. Blackwood's face had gone pale. You're bluffing. If you expose this, the scandal will destroy you, not us, Isabella said firmly. The story will be that foreign agents attempted to compromise the crown, and a traitor in our own government aided them. Alexander and I will be seen as victims who stood strong against external threats. You, on the other hand, will be reviled as the worst kind of opportunist. She could see Blackwood calculating, trying to find a way out. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. What guarantee do I have that you won't prosecute me anyway? My word as queen, Isabella said, which, unlike yours, still means something. You have 24 hours to announce your resignation. After that, all bets are off. After Blackwood left, Isabella found herself alone in her study, the weight of the day's events finally catching up with her. She had won this round, but the game was far from over. There would be other challenges, other threats to navigate. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Alexander entered hesitantly. I heard Blackwood left. Did he? He'll resign tomorrow, Isabella said tiredly. One threat neutralized. Alexander took a step closer. Isabella, I know you said you weren't ready to hear this, but I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for the affair, but for everything. The lies, the betrayal of your trust, the danger I put our family in. Isabella looked at him for a long moment. I know you're sorry, she said finally, but sorry doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't restore trust or heal the wounds. That will take time, if it's even possible. I'll do whatever it takes, Alexander said earnestly. Counseling, public penance, anything. I can't lose you, Isabella. I can't lose our family. That's not entirely your choice anymore, Isabella replied. But I'm willing to try for the sake of our children and our kingdom. We'll take it one day at a time. Alexander nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. That's more than I deserve. Yes, Isabella agreed. It is. As he turned to leave, Isabella called after him. Alexander? The announcement about Blackwood's resignation. We'll make it together. The kingdom needs to see us united. Of course, he said. Thank you, Isabella, for everything. After he left, Isabella returned to her desk and began drafting the statement they would release the next day. The palace had been in shock, but she had managed to turn a crisis into an opportunity. Blackwood was neutralized, the foreign plot was exposed, though not publicly, and she had gained the upper hand in her marriage. But, as she wrote, Isabella knew this was just the beginning. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt, and there were still questions to be answered. Who else had known about the affair? What other plots were brewing in the shadows? And, most importantly, could she ever truly forgive Alexander for his betrayal? The Game of Thrones continued, and Isabella intended to win. But victory, she was learning, came in many forms. Sometimes it meant crushing your enemies. Sometimes it meant finding the strength to forgive. And sometimes it meant having the wisdom to know which battle required which response. As midnight approached, and the palace settled into sleep, Queen Isabella of Valdoria continued to work, planning her next moves in the complex chess game that her life had become. The palace was no longer in shock. It was in her capable hands, and she would guide it through whatever storms lay ahead. Part 4 6 months had passed since the scandal that had nearly torn the Valdorian royal family apart. The autumn leaves were falling in the palace gardens as Queen Isabella stood before her mirror, adjusting the sapphire tiara that had belonged to queens of Valdoria for 3 centuries. Tonight marked their 20th wedding anniversary celebration, an event that had taken on far greater significance than anyone could have imagined. You look magnificent, Margaret said from the doorway. The princess had become Isabella's closest confidant during the difficult months of rebuilding. I look like a queen playing a part, Isabella replied, smoothing her midnight blue gown. Which, I suppose, is what I am. You're more than that, Margaret said firmly. You're the woman who saved the monarchy. Not many could have done what you did. Isabella's thoughts turned to the tumultuous months that had followed Lord Blackwood's resignation. The political fallout had been carefully managed, with the official story being that the deputy prime minister had stepped down due to health concerns. Only a select few knew the truth about the foreign plot, and Sophia Castellan's role in it. The real challenge had been rebuilding her marriage with Alexander. They had entered intensive counseling both individually and as a couple. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a discreet therapist who specialized in high-profile clients, had guided them through painful conversations about trust, betrayal, and the pressures of royal life. Your Majesty, a footman announced from the doorway. His Majesty requests a moment of your time before the ceremony. Isabella nodded. Send him in. Alexander entered, resplendent in his ceremonial uniform. The months of crisis had aged him. There was more silver in his dark hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But there was also something else, a humility that hadn't been there before. Isabella, he began, then stopped. You take my breath away. Thank you, she replied formally, though she felt a flutter of the old attraction. That had been one of the surprising discoveries in therapy. Despite everything, the chemistry between them hadn't died. It was buried under layers of hurt and betrayal, but it was still there. I have something for you, Alexander said, producing a velvet box. An anniversary gift, but also a promise. Inside was a necklace unlike anything in the royal collection. The centerpiece was a phoenix rendered in diamonds and rubies, rising from flames of yellow sapphires. A phoenix, Isabella said softly. Rising from the ashes, Alexander confirmed. Like us. Like what we're building from the ruins of my stupidity. Isabella allowed him to fasten the necklace around her throat. His fingers brushed her skin, and she didn't flinch away as she once had. We should discuss tonight, Alexander said, stepping back. The choreography of it all. We appear together, united and strong, Isabella recited. They had planned every moment of the public celebration. We danced the first waltz. We smile. We show the kingdom that the monarchy endures. And after? Alexander asked quietly. When the cameras are gone and the guests have left? Isabella met his eyes in the mirror. We continue the work. One day at a time, as we agreed. The investigation into Sophia Castellan had yielded more surprises in the intervening months. She had indeed been recruited by foreign business interests, but Duke Edmund's team had uncovered a deeper layer to the conspiracy. Sophia herself had been manipulated, her family threatened if she didn't comply. In her own way, she had been as much a victim as anyone. They had tracked her to Argentina, where she was living under an assumed name. Isabella had made the difficult decision not to pursue extradition. The woman had provided evidence that had helped them root out other foreign agents embedded in the government. Her disappearance was punishment enough. The children will be here soon, Isabella said, changing the subject. Have you spoken with Theodore? Their eldest son had taken the revelation of his father's affair the hardest. At 16, he was old enough to understand the full implications of what had happened. For weeks, he had barely spoken to Alexander, and there had been angry confrontations that had left both father and son in tears. We had a long talk yesterday, Alexander said. He's still angry, but he's trying. He said he would stand with us tonight for the good of the kingdom. He's becoming a true prince, Isabella observed, understanding that duty sometimes means personal sacrifice. He gets that from you, Alexander said. All their best qualities come from you. A knock interrupted them. Your Majesties, the major domo announced, the guests are assembled. As they prepared to leave, Alexander offered Isabella his arm. She took it, feeling the symbolic weight of the gesture. They were presenting a united front, but it was more than mere performance now. The months of therapy, of brutal honesty and painful reconstruction had begun to forge something new between them. Not the naive love of their youth, but something perhaps stronger, a partnership tested by fire and chosen deliberately. The ballroom was magnificent, with thousands of candles creating a warm glow that complemented the crystal chandeliers. The cream of Valdorian society was present, along with foreign dignitaries and ambassadors. Isabella saw familiar faces, allies who had supported them through the crisis, others who had waited to see which way the wind would blow. Their Majesties, King Alexander and Queen Isabella of Valdoria. They entered together, the crowd rising to its feet in respect. Isabella felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them, searching for cracks in the facade, signs of the rumored troubles. They would find none. She and Alexander had become expert at presenting unity. Their children were waiting on the dais, Theodore in his cadet uniform, Catherine in a rose-colored gown that made her look older than her 14 years, and James trying to look serious despite his excitement. Isabella felt a surge of fierce love for them. Everything she had done had been for them. My lords and ladies, Alexander began the traditional anniversary address, his voice strong and clear. 20 years ago, I took Isabella as my wife and queen. They have been years of joy and challenge, triumph and trial. But through it all, one thing has remained constant, our commitment to Valdoria and to our people. Isabella watched him speak, noting the careful wording they had agreed upon. No direct lies, but nothing that invited deeper scrutiny either. Tonight, Alexander continued, we celebrate not just our marriage, but the strength of the institution it represents. The monarchy has endured for 1,000 years because it adapts, it learns, and it grows stronger through adversity. When it was Isabella's turn to speak, she rose gracefully. Your Majesties, your Highnesses, distinguished guests, when I became your queen 20 years ago, I made a promise to serve Valdoria with all my heart. That promise has been tested this year in ways I never anticipated. But I stand before you tonight more committed than ever to our nation, our people, and our future. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room. Change is never easy. Growth is often painful, but from challenge comes opportunity. Valdoria has emerged from recent difficulties stronger and more united than before. And so have we. The applause was genuine, she could tell. The kingdom had been unsettled by rumors and whispers, but seeing their monarchs standing together, speaking with confidence, reassured them. The first waltz was a carefully choreographed affair. As Alexander led her onto the dance floor, Isabella remembered their wedding day, how young and innocent they had been. The orchestra began to play, not their original wedding waltz, but a new composition created for this anniversary. Another symbol of renewal. You're trembling, Alexander murmured as they began to dance. I'm remembering, Isabella replied. All of it, the good and the bad. Do you regret it? He asked, choosing to stay, to try again. Isabella considered the question as they moved in perfect synchronization. Ask me in another 20 years, she said finally. As other couples joined them on the dance floor, Isabella caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, Duke Edmund, watching with approval. He had become her strongest ally through the crisis, and she had rewarded his loyalty by making him the new deputy prime minister. The intelligence services had been thoroughly reformed under his leadership, preventing future infiltrations like Sophia's. Mother, Theodore appeared at her elbow as the dance ended. May I have a next dance? Isabella smiled at her son, proud of the man he was becoming. As they danced, Theodore spoke quietly. I know this hasn't been easy for you. Forgiving him, I mean. I haven't fully forgiven him, Isabella said honestly. But I'm trying, for all our sakes. I understand duty, Theodore said. But don't you deserve happiness too? Isabella looked at her earnest son. Happiness comes in many forms, my dear. The happiness I knew at 20 is gone forever. But there might be a different kind waiting in the future. Deeper, perhaps. More complex. Built on truth rather than illusion. The rest of the evening proceeded flawlessly. Isabella danced with ambassadors and ministers, accepted congratulations, and subtle probes about the state of the royal marriage with equal grace. She noticed Alexander doing the same, fielding questions with a new diplomatic skill born from her experience. Near midnight, As the celebration began to wind down, Isabella found herself on a balcony overlooking the gardens. The autumn air was cool against her skin, a welcome relief from the warmth of the ballroom. "Hiding, Your Majesty?" She turned to find Ambassador Reginald Crowe, the man Margaret had once suggested as a potential lover to level the playing field. He was handsome in a distinguished way, with silver at his temples and intelligent hazel eyes. Taking a moment, Isabella replied, "It's been an intense evening." "You've handled it magnificently," Reginald said, joining her at the balustrade. "No one watching would guess at the storms you've weathered." "That's the point, isn't it?" Isabella said. "The monarchy must appear stable, eternal, unchanging. Even when everything behind the scenes is in flux," Reginald agreed. "I admire your strength, Isabella. Not many could have done what you've done." There was something in his tone that made Isabella look at him more closely. "Reginald, are you simply expressing admiration for a remarkable woman?" he said smoothly. "Though I confess, when I heard the rumors months ago, I did wonder." "Wonder what?" "Whether you might choose a different path. You had grounds for divorce. You could have rebuilt your life, found someone who truly appreciated you." Isabella smiled sadly. "And abandon my children's birthright? Throw the kingdom into chaos? That was never really an option." "No," Reginald agreed. "You're too dutiful for that. It's both your greatest strength and perhaps your tragedy." Before Isabella could respond, Alexander appeared in the doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, but Isabella saw the flash of something. Jealousy? Concern? In his eyes. "My apologies for interrupting," Alexander said formally. "Isabella, the Cardinal is asking for you. Something about the charity initiative you're launching." "Of course," Isabella said. She nodded to Reginald. "Ambassador, thank you for your kind words." As she passed Alexander in the doorway, he caught her arm gently. "Be careful," he said quietly. "Men like Crow see opportunity in our difficulties." "I am aware," Isabella replied coolly. "I've become quite good at recognizing opportunists, wouldn't you say?" Alexander flinched but didn't argue. As they returned to the ballroom together, Isabella reflected on how much had changed. Once, Alexander's jealousy might have amused or flattered her. Now, it simply reminded her of the careful balance they maintained. The celebration ended precisely at 1 a.m, as planned. The guests departed in a flutter of thanks and farewells, and gradually the palace returned to its nighttime quiet. The children were sent to bed, the staff began the massive cleanup, and Isabella found herself alone with Alexander in their private sitting room. "We did it," Alexander said, loosening his collar. "We convinced them. We convinced them we're united," Isabella corrected. "Whether we convince them we're happy is another matter." Alexander poured 2 glasses of brandy, offering her one. "What would make you happy, Isabella?" Truly, it was a question they had explored extensively in therapy, but Isabella's answer kept evolving. "Time," she said finally. "Time without new scandals. Time to see if what we're building is real or just another performance. Time to learn to trust again." "I'll give you all the time you need," Alexander promised. "I know I have no right to ask for more." Isabella sipped her brandy, studying the man she had married 20 years ago. "Dr. Hartwell says trust is rebuilt through consistent small actions, not grand gestures." "Then, I'll focus on the small things," Alexander said. "Every day, for as long as it takes." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of the evening settling around them. Finally, Isabella rose. "I'm going to bed. Tomorrow we have the foundation meeting, then lunch with the Prime Minister." "Business as usual," Alexander said with a slight smile. "Shall I?" He hesitated. They still maintained separate bedrooms, though that too was beginning to shift slowly. "Not tonight," Isabella said gently. "But thank you for asking rather than assuming." As she prepared for bed, Isabella reflected on the evening. The public spectacle had been a success. The monarchy appeared strong. Her children were adapting. The kingdom was stable. By any measure, she had successfully navigated the crisis. But in the quiet of her room, with the phoenix necklace glinting on her dressing table, Isabella allowed herself to feel the exhaustion of the past 6 months. She had saved her marriage, her crown, and her family's future. The cost had been high, Innocence lost, trust shattered, the fairy tale revealed as illusion. Her phone buzzed with a message from Duke Edmund. Intelligence indicates Lord Blackwood has been in contact with exile groups in Switzerland, monitoring situation. So it wasn't over. Perhaps it never would be truly over. There would always be threats, always be those who saw opportunity in a monarchy's moments of weakness. But Isabella had learned she was stronger than she had known. She had faced the worst, betrayal by the person she trusted most, and survived. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting her maid. But it was Alexander who entered, looking uncertain. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I wanted to thank you. For tonight. For everything. For giving us a chance when I deserved none. We've been through this, Alexander. I didn't do it for you. I did it for the kingdom, for our children." "I know," he said, "but I'm grateful nonetheless. And I want you to know, Sophia meant nothing compared to what we have. What we're rebuilding." "Don't," Isabella said sharply. "Don't minimize it. It meant enough for you to risk everything. That's what I need you to understand. Own your choices, Alexander. All of them." He nodded, chastened. "You're right. I'm still learning." After he left, Isabella turned off the lights and lay in the darkness. 6 months ago, she had discovered those photographs, and her world had shattered. But from that shattering had come something unexpected, a kind of freedom. The freedom that came from having your worst fears realized and surviving them. The freedom of knowing exactly how strong you were when tested. The palace was no longer in shock. The king was no longer scrambling to respond. Instead, they were all adapting to a new reality, one built on truth rather than illusion, strength rather than naive trust. It wasn't the fairy tale Isabella had once believed in, but perhaps it was something better, something real. As sleep finally claimed her, Isabella's last thought was of the phoenix around her neck. Rising from ashes, reborn in flame. It was a perfect metaphor for what they had become. The scandal that should have destroyed them had instead forged them into something stronger, not unbreakable. Isabella was too wise now to believe in absolutes, but resilient. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Lord Blackwood's activities would need monitoring. The slow work of rebuilding trust would continue. The daily business of ruling a kingdom would demand attention. But tonight, for just this moment, Isabella allowed herself to feel something she hadn't expected, a cautious hope for the future. The palace had weathered its shock. The queen had found her strength. And somewhere in the space between betrayal and forgiveness, disaster and recovery, a new chapter was beginning to be written. It would not be a fairy tale. Isabella was done with those. But it might be something better, a story of real love, tested by fire and chosen with eyes wide open. In the morning, the sun would rise on a new day in Valdoria, and Queen Isabella would meet it as she had met every challenge of the past 6 months, with grace, strength, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving the unsurvivable. The Game of Thrones continued, but she was no longer playing by anyone's rules but her own.